Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right. Thank you everyone for making time to join us today. Today's session is especially for those who join us at the Islamic Fintech Week. And this is actually our first ever Ask Me Anything session. This concept of Ask Me Anything is quite a popular concept in the technology or startup world, where founders or CTOs or anyone that has an audience that wants to listen to them will go online, or in the past, of course, it's face-to-face, and respond directly to any questions, especially difficult questions. So for today, we've done it a little bit different. We did collect or receive a number of questions from all of you. And at the end, we will also allocate maybe 15-20 minutes for live questions. And the questions that you sent to me were compiled by our team. I'll share the slide. I'll share the screen. But yeah, I promise you I did not take a look at it, because the whole point of an Ask Me Anything is to be candid and sometimes to be put in a spot, right? Oops, I can't share my screen. Ataf, are you there? Can you enable me to share my screen? Ataf?
Yeah, Umar, I made you the host. Can you try it now?
Okay. All right. Yeah, it works. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So as I speak, feel free to also type in questions, but it would be probably interesting to hear your voice and for you to ask live later on. Right, so we have 12 questions today for me to answer. And before that, of course, we're going to talk about who we are very quickly and what we do. Okay, straight away question. All right. So about Ethis, I won't go and I won't talk about this in detail. What I will say is go check it out on your own if you're not so familiar. Go to ethis.co. Ethis is a combination of two words, ethical and Islamic. And what we do and what we want to do is to circulate money in an impactful manner, in a sustainable manner, money from people, money from organizations and institutions, direct to the real economy. And this point of the real economy is a very, very significant point, because today a lot of money from the banking system, from the financial system, it goes into financial products, it goes into derivatives, it goes into speculative instruments, and so on. So it does not necessarily have an impact, or even it may even have a negative cyclical impact on the economy, on the people. But what we do as a crowdfunding or investment platform is we match real funds, your funds, to real world projects, campaigns, and companies. All right, so that your money circulates to create real economic activity, to create real value, real output, employment, and so on, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, we've been doing this for a long time now, about close to 7 years. We started in 2014 or late 2013 in Singapore. I'm Singaporean and grew up in Singapore, but I lived in Indonesia for about 6 years. So when we set it up in Singapore in 2014, what we did initially was we just matched funds from our community, our friends and our networks in Singapore to invest in Indonesia. That's how we started. At that time, there were no licenses. Nobody knew what we were doing. I still remember when we spoke to property developers in Indonesia. They asked, how much money can you allocate? How much money do you have? And we say, we don't know yet. We have to talk to our investors. How fast will it take? We don't know yet as well, right? And concurrently, when we speak to our investors, we also found it difficult to secure projects, right? But that's how you start, right? And alhamdulillah, from there, it grew very quickly. We hit our first million in 10 months. And today, we have done quite a lot. But I would say that we have gone through a very long proof of concept phase, where we took a long time and a lot of energy and effort to get formally licensed and regulated in different countries. So alhamdulillah, today we are licensed in Indonesia for project financing and lending, Islamic lending. That was obtained late last year. And before that, we were operating for 5 years plus without a formal license. But we had a model that was not illegal. It was allowed to operate, and now we are allowed to go and do a lot more things. Alhamdulillah, in Malaysia, we also have a license for equity crowdfunding, which is where we are like a mini stock exchange or a mini bursa. So companies and projects in Malaysia can come to our platform and issue shares to the public. So when you invest in our Malaysian platform or through our Malaysian platform, you actually take up shares or equity in Malaysian companies. When you invest in the Indonesian platform, then you're providing financing with an expected return over an expected duration. And then when the program or the project completes, then you get your returns. And typically most investors will reinvest for a few years in various different projects. We also have Global Sedekah, which is a charity marketplace. We work a lot with institutions and organizations, and anyone, of course, can go to the platform to donate sedekah or make a wakaf or to give zakah, right? So check it out on ethis.co. You can see all our different platforms there. And inshallah, in the next 6 to 9 months, we will be opening up in more countries as well. So hope to have your support and dua for that. All right, first question. So I'm gonna try and not take too long per question, so that we have more time for the live questions. So how is fintech halal? I think my answer will be, how is it not halal? That is the important question, because I'm not a Sharia scholar, and we do have a Sharia scholar, but I do know that in Islam, you cannot say something is haram unless there's a reason for it to be haram. In other words, by default, something is halal, or anything is halal unless it's haram. All right. So that's why I flipped this question over. How is fintech haram? So fintech, or the technology portion, is an enabler. It's the form of it is the infrastructure or the tool or the solution for the financial activity. So what we really need to look at is the financial activity, right? So if the financial activity has haram elements, for example, the lending with interest, or gambling or speculation, or certain other things, investing in companies where the nature of business may not be halal, then that a fintech service or fintech platform or solution that engages in that activity is not halal, right? But if it's fintech per se in general across the board, there's no reason for it to be haram, right? Unless the activity is haram. Yeah. So when you talk about Islamic fintech or Sharia compliant fintech, then there's another dimension to it, which is to be formally recognized or endorsed as Sharia compliant. So just like how you can cook food at home and you don't have a halal stamp and you believe it's halal, right? And you can go to your Muslim friends and they assume it's halal because, especially if you're Muslim, or if you tell them, I know what's halal and haram and this is halal, right? But if you want to go out to the public and you have a restaurant and it's not, for example, it's not a Muslim majority country and so on, then you want to have halal certification, right? So for Sharia compliant fintech, typically there needs to be a Sharia advisor, Sharia consultancy. And in a country like Malaysia, Sharia compliance is very strictly regulated, in Indonesia as well. So in both countries, we have external Sharia advisors, and we also have our internal Sharia advisor, our Mufti Yusof, Alhamdulillah, who's also the COO of Ethis Malaysia. Tomorrow, he's giving a workshop, so if you're interested, do join us. We will share the details later on. All right, so first question done. Question 2. How can Islamic fintech revive the economy from the pandemic? All right, so again, I'm going to talk about Islamic finance, and then I'm going to zoom into the fintech component, right? Now, one thing very interesting, you should check out a podcast or a video on our blog or on Apple Podcasts, where I had an interview with Daud Vikri Abdullah, or David Vikri Abdullah. So he's a senior guy, senior gentleman. He's been in Islamic finance for a long time, and today he's consulting and advising from the World Bank to the Crescent Red Cross to Ethis, right? He's our advisor as well. So I had an interview with him 4 months ago at the peak of the pandemic when it was, quite bad. And he shared with me how things have changed significantly when he speaks to people and he tells them about the logic and the beauty of Islamic finance. People are open to it today. People meaning non-Muslims or Muslims who don't know about it are much more receptive towards it. And that's because there is an urgent need to look for real solutions, right? The current financial system, there are many shortcomings or flaws or embedded systems to create some kind of injustice or problems. And Islamic finance is based on divine wisdom, right? It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is perfect in terms of the theory. The challenge is the implementation, right? So in Islamic finance, I would say, alhamdulillah, a lot of good work has gone into Islamic finance, but Islamic finance has not managed to have the impact that as an industry it needs to have. Meaning it's not really managed to reach out to and assist the masses especially. So Islamic fintech has the potential to bring Islamic finance to the masses, to Muslims and to non-Muslims. And the big difference is that fintech is very nimble. Fintech is more flexible, and you can provide things that are on a micro level or like a so-called a microservice to individuals. For example, we can take in $1,000 of investment, whereas if you go to a large fund manager, they won't be interested in $1,000, right? So as a crowdfunding platform, we can take in smaller amounts. We can even choose to take in $10. But at this point, we feel that we want to serve a certain category of investors, right? But the point is, Islamic fintech can bring Islamic finance, the principles of Islamic finance, the models of Islamic finance, the solutions of Islamic finance to the wider economy. And this is not only in more commercial finance, but also social finance. If zakat, let me just give one quick example before going on to the next question. Today, the taxation system globally, it's under pressure, right? It doesn't work so well, and there's a lot of tax evasion and so on, right? Now, one solution that has been touted and has been promoted by various parties over time is a tax on wealth, because the rich are not necessarily high income, they have large wealth, right? It's not about how much money they cash flow or they earn every month. It's about how much wealth they have, and that wealth is what should be taxed. So that is exactly what zakat is. Zakah is a tax on wealth, right? So that's just one example, and this topic can go on for a long time, but I believe you get an idea. How to stop, or if not possible to stop, decrease circulation amount usage of riba in the world? Wow. It's a good question from Saudi Arabia. I think sometimes there's certain things that are beyond our capability, our control, right? And as Muslims, I believe what we need to look for first and foremost is look out for is ourselves, our family, our community. And so if 2 billion Muslims worldwide start to, of course, not everybody is financially active, but yeah, I'm just saying if the gigantic Muslim population, which makes up almost about a quarter or a third of the world, if we start to take a stand and start to remove ourselves from riba as much as we can, I think that will make a difference, right? So maybe not stop immediately, because everything we do, the entire financial system is based on money creation, which essentially is riba. But in our own circles, in our own way, through our own efforts, I think that is where it starts, and that's where it can make a difference in the long run, inshallah. How to become a fintech specialist? Well, today, I would say you can be a specialist in almost anything. Of course, it depends on your skills, your interests, and all that. But in general, today you can be a specialist just by learning online, right? And especially with the COVID, this has become even more possible and feasible and common, right? You can learn anything online. And or you can go and take formal courses, which will be maybe more structured, more theoretical, and usually more expensive. Now, my background I can share is I went to business school in National University of Singapore for 1 year, and then I left. I left with the intention of coming back to study, but once I got into the business world, I never turned back, right? And people today consider me a fintech specialist, but I have no formal education in this. What I know is from learning from others and learning in my own time. All right. So how to become a fintech specialist? Go and learn in your own time as much as you can. It can be formal learning, it can be informal, or so-called more casual learning. There are all sorts of free courses, all sorts of paid courses, all sorts of certificates. And fintech is a wide area. So to be a fintech specialist, you're a little bit of a generalist because you want to know, on a broader scale or broader level what fintech is about. But if you want to go deep into various things, there are a lot of things that you can go deep in with fintech, right? So it depends on your interest. Okay, let me move on. Thank you for the question. All right. So a question from down under. Well, it's very international. MashaAllah. So, okay, this is one of my favorite questions. It's basically talking about what we do. Crowdfunding is where you have a platform that matches funds and projects via the platform, right? So the platform's role can be quite different depending on the platform itself. Yeah, but essentially it is a platform that matches funds and campaigns or projects or companies or fundraisers. Now, this is similar to maybe most of you would be familiar with e-commerce, shopping apps, grocery apps, and transport apps like Uber, Careem, Grab, and so on. So, for example, Grab or Uber or Careem, a transport app, matches those who have cars or those who can drive to those who want rides. Grab or Uber does not own the fleet of cars, and it does not technically employ the drivers. So it is just a platform, it's a matchmaker. Similarly, for crowdfunding, it's not our money, it's not Ethis money, it's your money. It is not our business or our project, it is your project or a project that comes to us, right? So that's the basic concept. And it can be implemented for investment. Investment, again, there are many types. It can be implemented in charity, and it can even be implemented for other things, other hybrids, for rewards and so on. Okay, so I think inshallah that's quite clear already. And but one thing I wanted to highlight is that every platform is different, every country is different. If you're talking about investment, typically you need to look at regulations as well, and every country has a different way of regulating crowdfunding. Yeah, and very quickly, crowdfunding for investment, you have equity crowdfunding and lending crowdfunding or P2P crowdfunding and various kinds of hybrids and combinations in between. Okay. Now, how can this benefit minority communities? Basically, it helps to flow money. And when you flow money effectively and you flow money to the right projects, and the right projects here can be either when you talk about commercial viability, or you talk about social impact, or you talk about support, right? It can purely be support. For example, there is a large Nigerian diaspora around the world, right? Nigerians are everywhere. Some are very high income and so on. Right? Same can be said for Pakistanis or Indonesians and so on. Many countries, many developing countries have, people who originated from there or who had ancestry from there, who are all around the world today, right? And there's a crisis in one of these countries. How do you get this diaspora to come together, right? So this is something that crowdfunding can do. Let me give you another example. In the West, especially, there are a few alumni crowdfunding platforms where a university sets up a platform for the alumni, so the alumni can invest or donate in the university-related causes, projects, and campaigns, right? So this is how crowdfunding can bring people together, yeah? And there's many examples and opportunities for this. All right, next question. How would Islamic finance digitalization progress globally? How would it progress? Well, it's already progressing. And here, maybe we can divide it by banking, investments, or capital market. and social finance. All right. So I would say for all three is behind, it's slow, it's lagging compared to conventional finance. But it's not always bad to be behind because you get to see what happens in front. The main thing is you learn from what's happening in front and you internalize the challenges and the problems, and you take the good and you leave out the bad. So I believe that Islamic finance will digitalize very rapidly in the next 3 years, right? We already have right now three or four digital Islamic banks in Bahrain. There are two in UK. There's one. I'm aware that there will be one in Malaysia, inshallah, next year. There will be one in Australia next year, and various other countries that I'm not aware of, right? Then for the capital markets, we have crowdfunding, robo-advisors, like Ethis and a few others. And for social finance, there's also a strong push to digitalize zakah distribution and so on. So one thing I wanted to touch on, which is not really the question, is the difference between digital and digitalization. It's a big difference. Digitalization is where you take a book, which is physical, and you scan it and you make it soft copy and people can view it on their laptop or mobile or whatever. Is the same thing with the same function, with the same benefits, just digital. That's digitalization. All right. So I'm not so much talking about this. I'm talking about digital. That means native digital, born in a new kind of way or environment. For example, instead of a newspaper that's on your laptop, which is digitalization, now we have social media, which is a totally different way of getting information, right? So digital is what will really change the world, not digitalization. Yeah. How do we invest in halal industries? Well, hopefully Ethis will give you opportunities to do that. But essentially for halal industries, in general, whether it's halal industry or not halal industry, if you want to invest direct to companies, then it will be challenging to invest in private companies unless you have the relationships, connections, and sizable money. You can invest in halal related industries that are public listed, of course, and inshallah through crowdfunding, we can fill the gap where we can also identify good private companies to come onto the platform to receive investment. Right now, we have a few very, very exciting deals. One in particular, but I can't name it now because we're still in the early stages. But basically, this is a media-focused halal new venture that is backed by, or that is founded by a few very significant individuals here in Malaysia. And inshallah looks very exciting, but still early days. So inshallah, in the next few weeks or maybe 1 or 2 months, we should have this on the platform. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure whether I can answer this question in any other way, but basically you only can invest in public listed companies or private companies. And for private companies, either you know them or you don't, or they're interested in your money or they're not, because you may or may not have sufficient capital for them to receive. However, inshallah, through crowdfunding, we can aggregate funds from a pool of people and have a sizable amount. And on the other side, we have very many companies coming to us all the time to raise funds, and then inshallah we can match the two sides more effectively. So basically, that's what crowdfunding does, right? In the past, without crowdfunding, if you wanted to invest in a company, typically you look for friends, relatives, network, and if you want to raise funds in the same way, that will happen. Right? But things are not well organized. Maybe the legal part is not clear. There's no maybe sometimes there's no proper due diligence. It's based on trust. It's based on faith. And in the end, when it comes to money, trust and faith can disappear very quickly, and then na'uzubillah, it becomes a quarrel. It becomes a problem, right? So what crowdfunding does, it brings transparency, a systematic way of doing things that's also regulated, inshallah. How can fintech be used for zakat in Islam? All right. So to recap what I mentioned earlier, zakat is essentially it's a tax on wealth, right? It's a tax on excess wealth. If you have very little wealth, then you're a receiver, or you have no or little wealth, then you're a receiver of zakat. If you're beyond a certain threshold, you're a giver of zakat. Now, so for zakat, for fintech, what fintech can definitely do, the most basic thing is to create more transparency. That's what we're trying to do in Global Sedekah. right? If we have a good source of zakah funds, let's say from all of you, and maybe from some corporates, then we can go to the different beneficiaries or zakat institutions that receive zakah, and we can sort of put some criteria on them. If you want us to channel our zakah to you, right? We have, for example, R1 million in zakah every month, right? If you want to channel part of it to you, you need to provide reporting. You need to provide reports. You need to show us how you use the money. You need to audit your accounts, for example. So in that way, we create positive pressure. If you're not willing to do it, then fine, we'll go for somebody else. We'll give this money to somebody else or another organization that is willing to follow all these guidelines, right? And why I feel this is the most important basic thing is because according to the Islamic Development Bank, zakat today, every year, I'm not sure now with the COVID, but every year it is estimated that total global zakat from Muslims ranges from $500 billion to $1 trillion. That is an insane amount of money. It is many, many, many times more than global humanitarian aid. Yet there's still so many poor Muslims. Why is that so? Well, obviously there's a problem. And this problem is not just in zakah, it's also in charity across the board, everywhere. So inshallah, fintech, one way that it can bring benefit is to create more transparency, more accountability, develop more trust relationships between givers and receivers of zakah. And of course, beyond that, there's also things that are, I would say, enhancements like impact tracking, identity tracking, and so on. Yeah. Can you recommend any books on Islamic fintech and halal investing for newcomers in the industry? Well, there are many books actually. Recently, there's a number that have come out. Maybe what I can do is I don't have any offhand right now. As I said, I chose not to look at the questions beforehand so that I can give you an immediate answer. But yeah, there are a number of books. Maybe you can start by looking at some reports instead of books, right? I feel my personal opinion is that while books can be very valuable, but in something like fintech and maybe halal investing, no problem, but something like fintech moves so fast that I prefer to learn about it in smaller chunks instead of one book that talks about everything. By the time that book is published, it takes about a year. And by that time, a lot of things change. Right? And by the time it reaches you, it's 2 years after it was written. Because I contributed to 3 books so far, fintech books. And it takes a long time for all of us to write and compile a book. Right? So I'd suggest you maybe for a start get used to it by looking at reports. And reports will have not only data but also information, educational information. You can go to the IslamicFintechAlliance.com and there'll be a number of reports there that you can download and that you can read that came from various different other parties, right? IslamicFintechAlliance.com, right? In the event of a global recession, what should Ethis investors be prepared for? What's your strategy for weathering a recession and protecting investments? All right, very good question. In the event of, or rather in the current global recession that we have, or depression maybe that we have, what is the strategy? So for us as an aggregator, as a platform, we need to be very, very nimble and very quick, right? For the longest time, we have been focused on property development in Indonesia. And property development in Indonesia is great. The impact is good. You have collateral, you have fixed asset backing your investment, and so on. But for construction, the biggest risk will always be delays. And with this COVID situation, a number of our projects have been delayed. Yeah. So moving forward, when we onboard new projects today, we consider this risk of delay, and so the expectation or timeline is longer. The duration is longer, or we look for projects where there are certain ways to speed up the exit. Now, in addition to property, if you look at our platform, ethis.co Indonesia/ID, where most of our projects are right now, you will see a lot of short-term bridging finance or supply chain finance projects. And that is something that we've started to do in the past 6 months. The reason why we moved into this is 2 reasons. Firstly, the banks are not providing the same amount of financing support as they used to because they are waiting to see what happens, and they are basically stricter with their money. Yeah. And so these kind of very good projects, very good financing deals that used to always be snapped up by the banks are now left with no funder or less funders or less funding. And so they come to us, right? And alhamdulillah, we're very excited about these projects. Now, the second reason is because if it's short term, then, there's, in this kind of uncertain environment, a short-term project is something that a lot of investors prefer, because then you have a shorter time frame for variables or changes to happen, right? And typically what we do also is we look for projects where there is a clear exit. This is for Indonesia. And specifically for Malaysia, where we do equity investment, in fact, for both, we look for sectors, industries, and businesses that are on the upswing, right? If you do some research on the type of recession or the type of recovery that we could face, nowadays, a lot of economists and analysts say that we have a K-shaped recession, right? Previously, you're talking about a V-shape, down and then up, or a U-shape, or an L-shape, but now they're saying it's K, right? So what's K? Meaning some industries will go up quickly, some sectors, some industries will go down because of the fundamental structural change in the economy. Yeah. So we look at those that are going up, right? From, for example, food delivery, digital focused businesses, and so on. Yeah. In Malaysia, one key area that we're looking at is agriculture. That's something definitely on the upswing. Is it possible to conduct Wakaf crowdfunding? Yes, definitely. Wakaf is one of the key verticals we have, both in Global Sedekah, which is, charity or Wakaf, endowment, with no expectation of return. And for Ethis Malaysia as well as Ethis Indonesia, to bring investment funds to support Wakaf projects. That means you get a profit from supporting the Wakaf project, right? So I think it's a very, very good concept. The main challenge so far has been dealing with the religious authorities because they're not used to it. And so that may take some time. But alhamdulillah, especially in Indonesia, Wakaf is really growing very fast right now. For example, I'm aware of 2 large organizations that have more than combined about 20 Wakaf hospitals. And we've been in discussion with them to provide financing for their Wakaf hospitals. Wakaf hospital meaning the land and or the building and assets are Wakaf. Yeah. All right. Oh, long question. Then investing, trading, cannot find an Islamic way. What should I do? All right. A number of questions here. And investing and trading, I think I can suggest Islamic Finance Guru. They are good. They have a lot of information there. For Ethis as well, we have a lot of information on our blog. So these are more of the online focused ones. But in my opinion, there's a lot of information out there. Maybe you just need to have more targeted searches, right? And you can even take out courses. Some are free, some are paid. You can go to, for example, you can write down IBFNet. IBFNet has good courses for social finance. There are many providers and books and information that you can find. Maybe not as much as the conventional space, but I'm sure there's a lot. Yeah. So probably do more research and do more searching, yeah, go to our blog as well. We have a lot of information there. We have a WhatsApp chat group and a Telegram group that we set up. So we will be sharing a lot of content there. We can even share this kind of lists, right? A list of books, a list of websites, and so on. So please join in the chat groups so that we can directly give you this kind of information. Oh, that's the last question. All right, alhamdulillah. So we're done with the questions. You can scan this if you want, but before that, let's look at the Q&A. I'm not sure whether you can, hold on. Okay. I'm not sure whether you can unmute yourself, but Ataf, can the participants unmute themselves and speak?
No.
Oh, they can't. Okay. All right, so you'll have to type it in. Okay, So let me look at the chat, then I'll look at the Q&A. So Muhammad Ali Imran, where can we read more about your project on equity crowdfunding and lending? Okay, yeah, you can come to our website, inshallah. You can join our chat groups as well. We will share information. So just go to ethis.co. We have a lot of information there. We have a good blog with a lot of articles and so on. All right. Okay, so I think probably I answered that question already. Another question here. Apart from equity market, which is mainly for big companies, how can investment in small companies be democratized for everybody using fintech and ensure investors' funds are not eroded, knowing small company risk is higher? Yeah, so that's a trade-off, or that's a challenge that will always be there. When you compare, we had one session on this in the Islamic Fintech Week, right? Investing in private companies versus public companies. So the thing about public companies, you know, especially blue chip companies, typically the understanding is the risk is lower. But at the same time, what we have seen very obviously in the past 6 months is that the real world and the stock markets are not always moving in tandem, right? Meaning, when things look bad in the real world, the stock market it doesn't seem to be affected sometimes. And sometimes it goes up and down, and the real world, there's no reason for it to go up and down so much. And part of the reason, from my understanding, is because there's a lot of money going in and out in a speculative manner, hot money that is in a way manipulating some of the markets and so on, or artificially creating market momentum or dampening market momentum. So the problem with the stock market is that, right, it's very difficult to really know, even if you do a lot of research, what's going to happen and how it's going to perform. So in the end, a lot of traders, especially the short-term traders, they just look at more speculative kind of measures. Right, something's going up, it's going to go up further. I'm going to buy now. Something's going down at a certain threshold. I have a trigger. I sell. Right. But for long-term investors who look at the real value of a company and so on, then for me personally, I think that's something that's more logical. Now, for private companies, it's much more complex in the sense that there are a lot of very good private companies and there are a lot of not so good private companies. There are a lot of high return, low risk private company deals and projects. And conversely, you have the other extreme as well. Because you're talking about normal real world SMEs, there's so many types, so many forms, so many levels, so many variables at play, right? And so for crowdfunding platforms, I mean, you asked what can democratize this? Essentially, it's crowdfunding or micro investing, right? And I'm not just saying that because we are doing it, but because that is currently the new model that has emerged because of fintech, right? And there are, I would say, two approaches for crowdfunding platforms. One approach is they have some data points, they have some screening mechanism that they can implement sort of across the board, any kind of company. They look at, for example, 50 data points, and their algorithm or their system will then analyze it and then give some kind of score, right? So there are platforms like that with one main method to screen anything, right? And it's debatable. Some are really good, some are not so good. Yeah. Then there are platforms that specialize in one thing or in a few things. And that is the approach that I feel makes more sense right now. And inshallah, from that experience of focusing on specific verticals, eventually we can build a technology product around it to automate the process. But the process, the intelligence comes first. And so, for example, we have been doing social housing projects in Indonesia for a long time, about 6 years. We have done about close to 50 projects from about 30 plus developers. So although we are not property developers, but after going through 50 projects and looking, understanding, and analyzing 30 different property developers, in some sense, we have more understanding of the market than any individual developer, right? We understand the process. Although we don't do it directly like a developer, but we understand it very well because we've gone through so many. Yeah. So that's what I feel makes more sense, right? That's why we have specific areas of focus. So in Malaysia, our focus is on impact businesses. Our business is also on agriculture. and collaborating with other technology companies and platforms that have data via SME or business clients. So for us, the data component is very important. We need to collect a lot of information, as much relevant information as possible, so that we can decide what we feel is good to present to you. By the end of the day, you make the decision yourself. And I have to recap and repeat that investing in a private company is always going to be risky no matter what. But that's also why typically you have an opportunity to get, outsized returns or larger returns, inshallah. Okay, so let's go on to the Q&A part. Okay, feel free, keep the questions coming. We have 15 more minutes, alhamdulillah. How can individuals support the growth of Islamic fintech across the globe? All right. You're supposed to ask me difficult questions, not happy questions. You ask me this kind of questions, I feel very happy, alhamdulillah. Because we've been championing and pushing this for some time and putting a lot of effort to try and make it work. But feel free to ask me difficult questions as well. Yeah, anything, right? Anything you want to ask. That's why it's called Ask Me Anything. Okay. So this question is, how can you individuals support the growth? I guess there's three ways maybe I can highlight, and one is something that a few people have asked before. How do you learn about it? How do you understand more about it? How do you get more awareness about it? So that's very important. The understanding part is very important, right? The more understanding you have, the more appreciation of what Islamic finance, Islamic fintech is, inshallah, the better you will be positioned to benefit from it and also to support it. Yeah. Now, the second is to get more people on board, basically, right? Spread the word, share the information, share articles, talk to people about it. In Malaysia, for example, equity crowdfunding has been around for a number of years, I think 5 years now, right? We just started, but the industry started 5 years ago. And in general, Malaysia is 30-something% Chinese and about 50% Malay Muslim, right? And in general, right, whether it's business people or professionals, the non-Muslim community here fully knows, is much more aware of fintech and crowdfunding as compared to the Muslim circles, right? Which is very unfortunate, but that's the reality. And that's because, I would say in terms of culture or mindset, the Chinese here are very business-minded. So when they see something new, something interesting, they are very curious. When we started having webinars here not webinars, sorry, real world seminars here, when we first came here 3.5, 4 years ago, and our topic is Islamic crowdfunding. Sometimes, a significant portion, maybe even half of the people who come are non-Muslims because they want to understand what this new thing is, right? So this curiosity and this urge to spread it is very important, right? So I urge all of you to also join our chat groups where we will share information, articles, and so on, and you can spread it onwards. And of course, the third is to participate. And participate here can be as a consumer, as a user, as a beneficiary, as an investor, or as an entrepreneur. You can probably even try to start your own thing in your own way. Yeah. So supporting it is basically, as I mentioned just now, learning about it, spreading it, and doing it. Yep. Apart from equity market, which is mainly for big companies. Oh, okay, we already answered this. Can you share with us your business journey and experience from early college days to Ethis? Oh, well, my history. Okay, I'll be happy to do that. So I was born and raised in Singapore. Where in Singapore, my story can be very long, but I'll just touch on what I think is the more interesting, relevant parts. So in Singapore, every male, 18-year-old male, must go for national service, right? Either the military or the police force or something. So I was very lucky. I went to the military for 3 months. I was, trained very aggressively in the military. And then at that time, I was about, significantly fitter and smaller. And I was selected to be an officer in the police force. So I became an inspector of police at the age of 19. And I had very heavy responsibilities, which was great. And that forced me to learn and to improve my leadership skill. But at the same time, I also made not bad money as an inspector for that 2.5 years. And so I used that money to do business. So when I was 18, I started my own business. And it was an online business. At that time, 18 is 20 years ago. But 20 years ago, online businesses were not so not so common. So me and my friends did an online business. It was basically a matching car body kit, car modification parts to customers, right? So we did that while we were in Singapore, while we were doing national service. And then I went to business school while continuing to do business outside. And I basically did not like business school. I felt it was very dry and didn't learn what I wanted to learn. And I left school when I set up a restaurant in Singapore. Right? Restaurant business is very tough, and it wasn't really my thing. But alhamdulillah, over 2 years, I think 1.5 years, I made some money and we learned a lot of things. And I made friends with a few Indonesians at my restaurant. And so I felt, oh, why not? Let's see what's happening in Indonesia. It's such a huge country. Singapore is so small. So I actually packed up and left. I went to Indonesia. I started networking. I went to business events. I went to join the Chamber of Commerce and so on. And when I went there, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have that much money also. But alhamdulillah, I got distributorship for a health tech product, a premium product. And I started, promoting it in Indonesia, setting up offices, doing B2B business. Alhamdulillah, I grew very large, quite large, I would say, over 6 years. We have branches in 5 different cities in Indonesia. And that's where I met my current co-founder, Ronald. He joined me as an intern, fresh out of school, and then he became my partner. So that business was really good. We made good money at a young age. Unfortunately, it collapsed very quickly. After 6 years, it collapsed when my supplier basically ran away with a lot of money, right? So we had reinvested all we had and other people's money also for a new batch of stock and so on, and then this guy just disappeared. And basically it was sabotage, right? So we basically lost a lot of money, lost everything we had. I came back to Singapore in debt. As a young guy living on your own, having money, you would buy things like cars and stuff like that. So at that time, my car was a sports car. It was repossessed by the bank, and overnight I was under heavy debt, right? Alhamdulillah, that bad or low point in my life, which is about 7 years ago, I was 27 years old, 28 years old. Yeah, so when that happened, it actually was the blessing in disguise, because from there I found Islamic finance. Yeah, so alhamdulillah, family, friends came forward, helped me to clear my debt. I paid them back. Took me 2-3 years to pay back everybody. And then, I I went back to my family business, which is education, which gave me good cash flow. And then I started to promote Islamic finance in Singapore with my buddy from college, who's a lawyer. And alhamdulillah, that's how it all started. Right? 2 years of promoting Islamic finance under a company called Amanah Asset Management, which I founded. Then there was a big demand from our community for Islamic investment, but there were not many options in Singapore. And so we set up our own product. And that at that time was called Club Ethis. Yeah, so it was a private investment club that had a website. And over time it evolved, and today that's where we are right now, as a Islamic fintech or Islamic crowdfunding platform. All right, so in a nutshell, that's my brief history, my 20 years of entrepreneurship, lots of ups and downs, but alhamdulillah, it's been a very fruitful and eventful and rewarding journey. Inshallah, a long way to go. Thank you, Hassan, for the question. Damisa Kazim, what's Ethis doing in the area of empowerment, less privilege among the participants for IFW? All right, so in terms of empowerment, I guess it's a very broad question. Empowerment can be education. We're doing a lot there. We're trying to do as much as we can. Empowerment can also be in terms of the kinds of deals and projects that we onboard. So across the board, everywhere, we always focus on creating social impact, right? On doing good and on uplifting the businesses that we support. Right? In Indonesia, we do investments in social housing. We do investments in social enterprises in Malaysia as well. And in terms of empowerment, another way maybe is how we can potentially empower the middle level or middle class of investors by providing them access to projects or companies that typically would be difficult to access. Yeah. So I guess that can probably answer your question. Thank you for that. And Hassan, another question from Hassan. Any programs to expose the youth to crowdfunding and social investment. Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's very, very important to get the youth involved. And for us, we do it in two ways. We do have a number of university talks. And now that everything is online, if you are connected to any university anywhere in the world, and I mean university, college, whatever, right? Any kind of institution or youth group, we'll be happy to speak to them, to share with them, to give webinar and so on. Yeah. And secondly, we do a lot of internships, and right now we have a lot of openings. And Alhamdulillah, over the years, we've had more than 20 interns come and go. Some of them, come for a short period of time to go back before they go back to study. Some come, develop, learn, and continue with us. Alhamdulillah, today our management, our key leaders, about 80% of them or more actually came from internships at the start. Yeah. So we try to do our best, and I truly believe in youth. When I started doing business when I was 18 years old, not many people took me seriously. But today, especially if you're a young entrepreneur, it's a totally different kind of mindset. There are so many successful young entrepreneurs, so many successful young people. So, we do try a lot to get the youth involved. Okay, there's another two questions. What are the best practices in risk management to reduce risk investing in private companies? All right, so here it depends on what kind of private investment or private company you're looking at, because there's a wide range, right? So maybe I'll talk about what we do. Yeah. So firstly, Indonesia, and then I'll talk about Malaysia. Indonesia, we've been doing it for some time. We provide bridging funds to property developers who are building houses for low-income families or affordable housing. Some with government support and some direct to the public or fully private. And how do we reduce the risk is, of course, since there's an asset, there's physical asset when you do property development. So one way to reduce the downside risk is to get collateral, is to have access to or ownership of fixed assets. So na'uzubillah, if something goes wrong, then we can go through a recovery process to take over those assets, right? And eventually liquidate those assets and get your money back. Or continue the project and eventually get your money back, right? So for property, that can be done. Yeah, there are many other things that we do to reduce the risk for property, but I won't have time to go through everything right now. Now, the second type of project that we do is more of supply chain financing. That means helping a company to buy something or buy equipment or buy stock or provide some working capital for a period of time until they get a certain amount of payment or revenue that is secure or expected, right? So there we look at the counterparty risk, the performance risk and the counterparty risk. Performance meaning, is it highly likely for this business to be able to complete the contract or the agreement? So we look at the track record and everything and whatever other risk factors. Then how strong is the payer or the source of revenue? Okay, so those two are very important. Now for Malaysia, it is equity crowdfunding. So you invest in a company and you take shares in that company. Again, I won't have time to go through in so much detail, but you can have technology startups, you can have physical businesses that are on the upswing, you can have a new kind of business that's emerging, right? So these are the three main types that we look at. Now for startups, we don't have many yet. We had one. Our first campaign is a delivery kitchen or cloud kitchen or virtual kitchen or ghost kitchen. That is a kitchen that serves popular delivery food brands, right? So this particular kitchen, I believe, has 5 different popular delivery food brands that use that one kitchen and share the one kitchen, right? So that's the first project that we did. And for startups, I would say at the end of the day, startup investing, the key strategy is basically to diversify, to invest in many different startups and to know what you're investing in. Yeah. So the easy way for some investors is to tag along or to look at other investors who have come in who are experts in startup investing, right? And to tag along with them, right? So that's why there are all these angel groups, VC groups, and so on. And for us, we will be moving in this direction as well. Now, for agriculture, what we're looking for is sustainable agriculture. That means agriculture that can continue on its own and can produce revenue with very, very minimal cost and very minimal negative impact on the environment. And this is actually good for business because whatever you grow becomes revenue because there's so little cost, right? So the kind of concepts like permaculture and so on. Okay, I'm just running through very quickly because we don't have time. Yeah, it's a good question. And then for other companies, like general SMEs, we really need to be able to access the data and to look at the data. Data meaning how the company is doing in terms of its cash flow, in terms of its business opportunities, in terms of the industry prospects. I mean, there's a lot of different variables and factors. So what we try to do as a platform is to focus on a certain scope or type of business, right? Understand it, do a few projects, and then scale it up. And in doing so, also try to educate you about it, right? So far, the main one that we have done a lot of is the social housing in Indonesia. And right now is all these other areas that I just talked about. Okay, time for one last question, inshallah. Do you believe AI can help Islamic social finance become more efficient in aspects such as allocation, distribution of zakah, management of wakaf, or should it remain in the hands of Muslims? Oh, all right. Well, my view of hands of Muslims and AI is that an AI is a program. It's still a program. It's still created or done by or coded by a human being, right? Of course, it can sort of think on its own. That's why it's called artificial intelligence, or it can learn things on its own. Right? Maybe that's more accurate. Now, but still, at the end of the day, it boils back down to how it is developed and the logic behind it. So, first question is, can it help? I would say most likely yes, although maybe not yet. But AI, most research papers, most evaluation of AI point towards it being a very, very significant technology in the near future and becoming more and more significant over time, right? But at the end of the day, I feel today the challenge is the very basic model, is a very basic distribution that is lacking. If you don't have something that is working at the basic level, it's difficult to enhance it further with something like AI. All right. So that's why I feel the focus should not be on can blockchain help wakaf, can AI help zakat? Yes, it can, but the wakaf system, the wakaf players, the zakat organizations, the community, this very, I would say, fragmented or even broken ecosystem needs to be fixed. And once it's fixed and once it's moving nicely, then technology can come in to make it much, much better. All right. So AI, for example, can do a lot of things, can automate a lot of things, and can, for example, highlight or identify certain types of fraud or trickery of people who are collecting zakat twice, or people who don't deserve zakat but are taking zakat, and all these things. Right now, it needs to be done manually. But once the manual intervention is really effective, then technology can come in to replace the manual intervention. But I don't think you can just throw technology there and expect it to work, right? So I hope that has answered your question. I hope all my answers and my sharing has been beneficial, inshallah. Let's see if we have any final questions. When is the internship? All right, so I mean, everything is online. You can go to, hold on. Yeah. Ataf, can you share the link to the Telegram and to the WhatsApp group for those who are not in it yet? You feel free to join us. You can also follow me on LinkedIn if you're active there. Right? I just posted about the internship, I think yesterday. So feel free to apply if you're keen. Yeah, so there's a lot of different links here that Ataf has shared with all of you. Alhamdulillah. So yeah, we've reached the end of today's session. Happy to see some familiar names. It's meant to be an intimate, smaller group of people because we want to do a number of these kind of sessions. And typically, if there's more than 20, 30 people, then it may not be so interactive. But alhamdulillah, today we got a lot of good questions, and I hope my answers and my sharing was useful. Do not have WhatsApp group. Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group. You can join it. Ataf, can you, we have a Telegram group, yeah. Yep, you can join the Telegram group, inshallah. Okay. We'll send follow up with the recorded session and more relevant links. Okay, all right. So thank you, Ataf, for organizing and facilitating, and thank you everybody for making time. Alhamdulillah. Do keep in touch. And as one of the questions that I answered earlier, how can you support Islamic fintech? I'll recap. Learn about it, understand it, share it, spread it, and finally get involved and start doing things. All right. And last but not least, please make dua, because the dua is a weapon of the believer, and inshallah, with all our dua and our support, we can do a lot of good together. Thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.